Last week we started this process of going through a new sermon series, and we're going into the ancient teachings, the Middle Age ancient teachings. When you say ancient, you have to be careful about what time period you're talking about when you're dealing with scriptures and church tradition. So more Middle Ages, Dark Ages kind of stuff. The 7 deadly sins. Last week we started with pride, and we talked about how pride is really very much misdirected love, and how pride is one of probably the sneakiest one, because it can kind of start all the other sins. And pride in its nature is very competitive. Without someone to compete with, pride doesn't really have anything to latch on to in your life. So we started with pride. And just kind of going back into that to transition to where we're at today with envy and actually looking at the social platform Facebook. Thomas Aquinas said that pride is the father of vain ambition, and that it gradually warps the soul toward envy. Think about it this way: if pride's about competition and you are better than someone else, you have the sin of pride. But what happens when you're not, in whatever weird way you're comparing yourself to somebody else that's not based on God's teachings, and they're better than you, or they have more of something than you? Well, pride then is twisted into envy. And we'll talk about how envy is a very unique sin out of the 7 today as well, and that there's one thing that it has that the others really don't, that makes it pretty sad. It's a pretty sad sin, right? The one thing I do want to begin with, though, is to talk for a moment about the difference between jealousy and envy. Especially in social media, folks don't take time to research what words mean anymore. And they'll just throw words out because they think that that's what that means, instead of actually looking up what my grandfather's second favorite book was. His first was the Bible. His second was the dictionary. Grandpa loved learning more than anybody else I've ever met in my entire life. And he sat down and read the dictionary. And it sounds like such a silly thing, doesn't it? Until you do it and you realize how many words you don't know. That's a pretty powerful thing. So anyway, if you think about jealousy and envy being two sides of the same coin. Now, the sad thing about both jealousy and envy is if it deals with people, they've been objectified. Meaning, I am seeing someone in a relationship, I'm seeing someone, that I can possess, that I can have in my life or whatever. So jealousy is the fear of losing that privilege or that person or that relationship to someone else. Usually when we think of jealousy, it is in terms of a relationship or a connection that we have with someone, and then they talk to someone else, and we see that they might be better than us, and we get scared that we're going to lose that relationship. And so out of fear of losing that relationship, we become jealous. Now flip it around, and you see someone who has a good relationship, or you see someone who has, a great marriage or whatever, and you're envious of what they have. So they're two sides of the same coin. But jealousy, we've heard called what? The green-eyed monster, because it makes us sick. It makes us ill, not just in the soul, but sometimes in the body as well. So envy can be connected to jealousy, but for our purposes, we're really kind of connecting it into this idea that there's still a thread of pride. And what you'll see, I hope, throughout this process of going through the 7 deadly sins is you will see that the sin of pride goes through all of them. Just the stories that we heard from the scriptures just a minute ago. Cain's envy of Abel and his sense of pride that Abel shouldn't have more than he did. His offering was just as good. And so those two kind of combined, and he killed his brother. The first murder in humanity. Pride, envy. So I think we can see why these are such deadly sins, because of what can come after them if we don't take care of it. So envy is not as complicated as pride. Envy's pretty easy to spot. Even in ourselves, we can kind of tell, can't we, when we're envious? It's like, oh, I wish I had that. Oh, envy, right? There's little buzzwords, there's little catchphrases, there's little oops moments that we all have that we can kind of self-diagnose and say, okay, all right, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm thinking, and that's how I feel. A lot of times people think that if they see, remember the old show with Robin Leach, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Remember that old show? I'm Robin Leach, with a voice so, no, I'm just kidding. I was going to go into Robin Williams' thing, and then I remembered that wouldn't be appropriate for church, so I'm just going to stop right there. But Robin Leach hosted Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and it was the first time for most of us, especially me as a little kid, watching it on TV with my dad and seeing all these extravagant things. It's like they're eating lunch, and it's $2,000 a plate. Not to mention that each plate is $10,000, and you're just like, you're not envious because it is so far beyond what you could ever achieve. It's just not even there, right? There's no danger of the sin of envy when it's that far, when the gap is that big, right? It's like, oh, but then you start dialing it back and dialing it back and dialing it back, and you see someone who's just one bracket ahead of you, maybe in income, or someone who has 2 models nicer of a car than you have, and then all of a sudden the red light should be going off. Because envy is a sin of proximity. The closer someone is to where you are already at, the more danger you have of being envious of them. Envy works by twisting your thoughts to say, if you'd have been where they were, that would be you right now. Not to mention if it's a privilege or a job that they've worked very hard to achieve or what have you. It's that twisting. And David Hume actually backs that up, a Scottish philosopher. He says, rarely do we envy those who are greater than ourselves because envy breeds on proximity. That's not too far away from what you could have. And then we start thinking, well, why don't I have that? What can I do to get that? What can I do to take that from them? I mean, these are base, human, animalistic, barren instincts that we all have as human beings. Because there's something in us. Just look at a toddler. Well, look at a dog. Come hang out with us some night watching TV in the basement, and you'll see my older dog grab a toy, and you'll see the younger dog come right up on him and grab it and run away. Now, is she taking it because she wants it? Or is she taking it because she enjoys taking it from him? I don't know. Same thing with toddlers. They see someone's got a toy. I want that toy. I'm going to go over and take that toy. It's not even enough to kind of delve into a deep-seated understanding of what envy is. It's, I see that, I want it, I'm going to take it. It is a base, animalistic response to being a human being and living in this life. So it's a natural impulse. All of these 7 deadly sins are natural, baseline impulses that we as people of faith believe in something higher and must work to get beyond it. So that's kind of the understanding, with that. So let's get into Facebook for a couple minutes. How many of you have ever been fuming mad at someone else on Facebook? Why are those hands going up so slowly? It's tough because you can't ever get someone to listen to you on Facebook. You can shout at them, you can put the caps lock on, and I am so angry. But it's a very emotionally charged profile. It's also a very selective profile. And by that I don't mean they select who can and can't be on it. Anybody can be on it. But what gets shown? I show food all the time. You think I show you the burnt, crispy stuff that no one would eat? I'm not putting that on Facebook. I want everybody to think I'm a perfect barbecue pitmaster, I'm not putting the stuff that the dog wouldn't even eat. No, I'm not doing that. And do you think we do any less with our families? We took 300 back-to-school pictures, and we're going to put the one with the cowlick and the eye kind of looking around and the snot bubble or anything. You think we're going to put that one on there? No! We're going to find the perfect image of our perfect family. Well, no, we know it's not a perfect family, but we're going to put the perfect image up there. And then other people are going to see that. And see, that's another place where pride and envy twist together, because the pride in ourselves wanting to be envied by others. See how dangerous that is? We can lead someone into temptation, which I remember praying somewhere that we're not supposed to do that. Not sure. Anyway, so Facebook's out there, and we all realize, sitting here right now with, hopefully you don't have your phone open, and we all know that that's what happens. We all know that people put a polished, airbrushed, photoshopped version of themselves out there for the most part. And that's how we interact with people. You've got friends on Facebook, if you are on Facebook, that you've never met in real life before. And so your understanding of who they are is based completely on them putting their best foot forward out of everything they say and everything they post. So if we're constantly seeing things that are near perfect, and we look to the brokenness of our own lives, how can we ever escape being envious of other folks when we see how perfect their lives are? Because how convenient is it for us to just forget that they're not perfect either? They just took more time on their computer sorting through the perfect photo, or on their phone to put the perfect photo out there to show how perfect their life really isn't. So here's something. Now, I do want to add a caveat to this. This is a legitimate psychological study. However, it was done in 2012. So I want you to be thinking, as I'm giving you the data from the psychological study, I want you to think, do you think things got better or worse since 2012? So researchers Chow and Edge in 2012 said that the more that an individual uses Facebook, the more likely they are to engage in certain behaviors that lead them to consume others' personal information. In doing so, they are confronted with more instances when they are prone to comparing themselves with others. They're just devouring the information. In other words, the longer an individual is on Facebook, the more information they are likely to consume, and they will see others' news, photos, profiles. They also found that the more people consume this information, the more likely they are to become envious. The more they are living their life through this artificial lens, the more likely they are to become envious. So that a person with a larger network of friends will also be more likely to feel envious than a person with a smaller network, because they're just checking in on a couple people they want to see and see how the kids are doing. Usually folks that have like one or two good friends and everybody else's family on their social media network. Even worse, if you use Facebook mostly or exclusively to just keep track of other people, you don't post, you just stalk. What the researchers call surveillance use. If you are a surveillance use Facebook person, you're likely to experience greater feelings of envy because you're not really connecting with folks, you're just observing. And envy is very much a visual sin, isn't it? It's what you see and then what you can imagine in your mind's eye compared to your own life. So rather than using the social network to share details of their own life through photos and updates, these folks use Facebook as a spy device. So that was in 2012, and the write-up going through the data by psychologist John Grohl. 2012. You think it's got better or worse? I mean, I was astounded because they had, it takes a good couple years to do a psychological study, to do the write-up, to make sure that it's legit, and then to get it published in a journal. So its published date is 2012. So the data was probably 2010. So we're looking at 8 years since that data was collected. Facebook plays into our lives when we are at our worst. Facebook plays into us when we're our trigger points are exposed, we're upset easily, We're tempted easily to want what someone else has, and especially that image of the perfect life, which we all admit and knowingly could proclaim right now that it does not exist. But my gosh, when we see that family that seems to just be on vacation every 2 weeks, you're laughing because you know it, right? And someone may be just working their fingers to the bone, and they pause for a moment and take a picture of their coffee cup or something on a beautiful morning. You're like, I wish I had time to do that. You see, it's not reality, and we're sinning anyway. We're not even being envious of something that's real. So how do you fight that? We've already talked about that it's something that we experience as a direct result of just simply being a human being. So how do we not want what someone else has? Well, the other thing to think about is what I said earlier about objectifying human beings. The first thing to do is not objectify them because they do not possess their spouse. They may have a great marriage, and you may be like, man, they have a great marriage, and stop at admiration. I wonder what they do to help get through difficult times, because I'm having a difficult time in my relationship right now. I wonder what they do to stay together. See, that's not envy. And it just takes a minute of perspective to be able to stay on that path of following Jesus Christ. You can appreciate what someone else is doing, what someone else has, who someone else is. But that minute that you see their life as a commodity that can be taken or shared or replicated, you know, your life right now is the sum total of all the decisions that you've made and all the decisions that anyone you've ever come in contact with has made. Plus some decisions that people whose decision, you know, their life choices affect us, you know, people at corporate levels and things like that and government levels. But for the most part, your own choices and the choices of those that you've had in your life. And some of those have been mistakes on your part, and some of those have been mistakes on the part of others. Some of those things could have been avoided, some of them not. And how many of us have come on the other side of a really rotten situation only to see, you know, I really would not want to go through that again, but I can see by the grace of God how I am in a much better place. Anybody ever had that kind of grace in their life? You see, when you want what someone else has at the other side of the valley, you're trying to take the easy way out of the suffering they went through to get it. And envy is so dangerous because it makes it sound like life is just so easy. So really, the one way is the way that you're going to see. Spoiler alert, every one of these sins can be avoided by love. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you're loving someone, you're happy for them when they're successful. I mean, go back through 2 Corinthians 13. Love is all these things. And instead of love, put a Christian. A Christian is patient, kind, not boastful, so on and so forth. Not filled with pride, not envious. See the pattern? Now, why is this such a big deal? Why is envy such a unique sin? Envy is the only sin that contains within itself its own punishment for you. Have you ever noticed someone who's envious? Do they seem happy? By definition, never. You'll never find someone who's envious being happy. Because envy carries within itself its own punishment, its own sickening condition of the soul. Dwight Moody tells the story of an eagle who was envious of another that could fly better than he could, and one day the bird saw a sportsman with a bow. So he tried to draw the sportsman's attention to that eagle that was flying so high. And he says, you know, sportsman, I really wish you'd just bring him down a peg. Just take care of that. He flies higher than I do. The sportsman said, hey, eagle, I would love to. Be happy to help you out. I just don't have the right kind of arrow. I don't have enough feathers on my arrow to be able to get my arrows to fly that high. So the eagle plucked out a couple of feathers. Would this help? The sportsman says, sure. Puts them on there. He goes, it just doesn't look right. I'm going to need a few more. And so they go through this exchange a few times, and the bird plucks different feathers, gives them to the sportsman. He finally looks over at the eagle, who now has not enough feathers to fly away, and shoots him. He was so envious of the other eagle flying higher than he was, he destroyed his own ability to fly. How many times in life are we so envious of someone else that we begin to eat ourselves up inside? And we rid ourselves of God's gracious gift of flight. The flight within our soul and our heart of being joyful in all things, and that our strength comes from the Lord. That kind of flight. So this week, keep an eye on yourself, especially on Facebook. And try to decide, are you happy for others? Or are you catching yourself plucking out feathers? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.